This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series is brought to you by Malwa Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert. For oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec, visit www.malwa-transport.ca. And for an expert and professional trucking insurance firm specializing in property and casualty insurance solutions for freight across Quebec, Canada and the United States, visit www.transportexpert.com. Welcome back then, folks, to TRTN for tonight's coverage of Season 3, Round 2, the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Malwa Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert, and live exclusively on TRTN. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here in the second round of the championship and our first double sprint of the season as we herald the arrival of a legendary Italian circuit here, the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Idino Ferrari, otherwise known as Imola. Founded in 1953, home of the former San Marino turned Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in Formula 1, now home of all things endurance racing on the European theatre, hosting grounds for both the European Le Mans Series and the FIA World Endurance Championships. Imola distinguishes itself amongst its Italian contemporaries on ACC by its tight and technical middle sector, complemented by its faster and flowing opening sector, is what offers up, in comparison to its contemporaries, this greater degree of complexity and verticality over tracks like the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza or the Misano World Circuit. Nonetheless, today is set to be an exciting double-header round, of course the first of its kind here for Season 3. Taking a look into the championship with Brands Hatch already under our belts here with a fiery opening round to Season 3. Let's see what Imola can bring to our doorstep today. Of course, this is part of the Italian doubleheader with Monza next around the corner, the first endurance race of the season. More to touch on that next week when we get into round 3. But for today, let's get a look at the session ahead. Well, taking a look into it, the first double sprint of the season, but with brand new parameters. The first 10 minutes of qualifying now goes over to the AMs, the last 10 minutes over to the pros. Now, this is an immediate change to the regulations that will stand even after today's round, with the rest of the season set to follow the same pattern. But that's where all comparisons stop for race 1 and race 2 then. We're seeing 30 minutes of racing now, both decided by a single 20-minute qualifying session, of course staggered between the two aforementioned classes. Also, no mandatory pit stops for either of these two races. Well, it was a surprising decision to bring us out of the exit of round 1. Of course, we saw George Todd down across the line. If we go to find him, out on track somewhere around here, he's in the Mercedes paddock, if we're not mistaken. Apparently can't seem to find him at the moment, so we'll stay on board with wishful winnings whilst we continue to dissect how things panned out in Brands. Of course, we saw Todd down towards the line, so most would believe when we get into the discussions just a moment from now into those championship standings that he would still be atop them. Well, so you may believe. Taking a look at a race control statement issued after round 1 of the championship, it was that the car number 12, Todd, was given a 20-second time penalty for a collision with car number 6 earlier in the race, that being Clinton Bourne. That shifted his finishing position from 1st to 5th, giving the win over to the 119 of Christian Lebay, who chased him down all the way to the very last lap of the race. So getting a look into the championship standings, we now find, rather typically then, Lebay atop the charts, but Dylan Vekere only 4 points behind. Wishful winnings on your screens at the moment, currently 3rd in the division then for the pros, with Valorio in 4th. George Todd, as mentioned there, dropped from 1st to 5th because of that penalty. That puts him only a few points up and ahead of Byron Forrest on his inaugural drive for Chevrolet. David Tanguay in 7th with 18 points, with Chili Peppers in 8th place. Timo de Tosto in 9th in the championship, rounding out the top 10 for the pros. Then Vinicius Gois in the, looking here, the number 444 with 12 points. Taking a look away then from the pros into the AM standings, we find at the moment Andrew Veldkamp at the lead of it, with Brandon Carr in 2nd. From behind them, we find the Jackal in 3rd place in the standings. And looking at it there, Eric Granados in 4th, Didier Potvin in 5th place in the AM standings, ahead of Stephen Black in 6th. 7th place for Christophe Dupois, Cal Ford in 8th place, and Ruben Pereira rounds out the current standing of the AMs with only 9 available point scorers after round 1 of the championship, leaving us with only 9 cars to discuss in terms of the AM standings. Heading into today's round then, we've been on board with the 2 Mercedes cars here of Wishful Winnings and Vinicius Gois, but let's get a look on towards the timing charts here as we see leaving the pit lane on board with Chili Peppers with Mercedes, formerly with Aston Martin, as we get on to the discussion of a few new faces here for this round of the championship. Currently in the midst of free practice, just under 14 minutes left to go, but there are a few drivers we'd like to take a little look at here. So first among them, we see here the number 692. This is Adrian Malherbe with Mercedes AMG, but there's also one driver that caught our attention during the pre-race practice coming up in towards today's session. We'll see if we can try and find them in a moment's time. Another new driver for this round appears to be having a little bit of trouble here. The number 42 Aston Martin. Taking a look here, this is on with, if we can get our records straight here, this is Adam Jeffrey. Little bit of trouble then for the Vantage. That was just on the run out through the Variante Alta, so it stood. And we'll get a full tour of the track as well over the course of the session before the first of our two races today. Taking a look at the timing charts at the moment, then Labay fastest in a Chevrolet 1-2 formation with David Tanguay second, Dylan Vaccaret third with Clinton Bourne in fourth, Didier Potvin in fifth with Anthony Valorio sixth, Richard Teasel in seventh. As we see there, one of our new drivers for today, Adrian Malherbe, in 8th place. Timo de Tosto rounds out the charts there as he crosses the line 9th. And as and when we find this extra driver into the lobby, we will bring to your attention this potential dark horse of qualifying later on in the session. We do hope to see him there, otherwise we'll talk about it a little later on. Staying on board then, we have of all drivers on with the Alpine of Anthony Valorio as we get into the discussion before qualifying today of the balance of performance changes. Well, taking a look, all but one manufacturer seems to be getting any kind of advantage in today's round of the championship, that being Aston Martin with 10 kilos off of the V8 Vantage, Audi net neutral for weight gain or loss, Chevrolet gaining 8 kilos, and then even further into the positives here, 13 on for Mercedes, 18 for BMW, 20 for McLaren, 22 for Porsche, and Alpine really on the short end of it with 25 kilos onto the A110. Already a featherweight in its class, is definitely going to be seeing it pack on the few pounds for the run in towards today's race here in Imola, or I suppose double head of races. So double point scoring opportunities as well to boot with the double sprint format. So for drivers like Valorio already gunning to a middle of the top 10 position, even with the heftily weighed down Alpine, things could get rather interesting for him. He drops down to 7th place, as now making their way onto the timing charts up and ahead of him. Across the line a moment ago was Clinton Bourne to 5th. And also Vinicius Gois to 2nd towards the trailing end of this free practice session. At presently 11 minutes left to go in free practice before we get into the run of our single static qualifying session. Now, this is a bit of a shift up from what we saw in the last couple of seasons when it came to the double sprint format. Before, it used to be a case we had two separate 10-minute qualifier sessions that would determine the grid for both races individually. Now, of course, with new regulation sweeps in, we are seeing a broad change to that mindset. Wishful winnings across the line a moment ago into that top 5, the number 233 up and ahead of the 161 of Vaccaret. Now, it's going to be curious to see what Vaccaret can do with such sizable advantage over the rest of the grid. That 10 kilos off, while it may not seem like a great deal, with everyone else around you gaining weight and no sign of Audi, who is set to gain nothing on the run-in towards this race, Aston Martin will find themselves the only one directly benefited from today's balance of performance. But again, keyword balance. Even though there is an advantage clearly shown from the net loss and net gain in terms of weight, all of that is designed to keep the cars as level as possible. So it's a driver by driver case here as to whether or not we'll see Aston Martin find any kind of advantage from 10 kilos away. Normally they would struggle at this track without. Presently then, we find 24 cars on today's grid, possibly more by the end of this session. We've still had a few drivers that mysteriously have yet to find their way into the lobby. You see there, Soviet Mario 911 in chat saying we're going to be very upset if the Malwar drivers don't do a formation lap at the end like Euro Titans do. Of course, that's referring to a very recent coverage we've had here on TRTN, the very, very controversial doubleheader at Season 5, Round 4, the NLRL Sunday League. That was last Sunday, a fantastic doubleheader of ultra-dramatic rounds in the Mount Panorama circuit. It was capped off at its very end by a wonderful parade lap by the folks over at Euro Titans, the current team's championship leaders. You see here with Labay making his way down towards the line. The Chevrolet now back onto winning form after the sudden change in fate found at the end of round 1, with the race decisions netting 20 seconds over to that of George Todd. Now, I looked back through that incident, and I was rather curious to see what incident had spurred on such a response, and I'll be completely honest, it was perhaps a bit of an extreme response for 20 seconds worth of time penalties. Now, what this was referring to was a bump and run down through Druids in the last race. Ultimately, that did knock down Clinton Bourne a few pegs there over the course of that race, but 20 seconds I felt like was a bit extreme. It seemed like a more 5 to 10 second penalty under any other jurisdiction, but that does go to show the measurements by which the Competizione Performance League is willing to go to ensure clean racing by keeping these ultra strict parameters in play. But is the knock-on fear perhaps going to be the case that drivers are going to feel a lot more hesitant to make moves at all? And this is a lot of the same kind of issue that surrounds modern-day Formula One. Is it going to be a case where having those restrictions in play, having those penalties be so high, is going to create this greater degree of hesitancy in the drivers heading throughout this season? Now, GT4 racing is by its inherent nature an extension of touring car racing. It is not an elegant sport. It is not a sport that often respects the boundaries of contact limits. Now, obviously, they wish to keep things separate there, a lot more cleaner, a lot more professional style of racing in the Competizione Performance League, but you can't deny the nature that is GT4. That ultimately is going to leak its way back out onto this grid by the end of this season. We saw it through Season 1 and we saw it through Season 2. We even saw inklings of it in the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series. This league is hungry to go side by side, to bash wheels, to bash doors, to scrape bumpers. And ultimately, it's those deterrents in play that's keeping them from doing that. And I do wonder, if and when the veil is lifted, what will they be able to do there? Nonetheless, it has still given us a fantastic ensemble of racing. And even though there are those heavy penalties in place, it is ultimately up to the jurisdiction of the drivers to report them. So if it was an incident they felt like they shouldn't report to the stewards, and obviously it won't be getting investigated. Currently looking at the session statistics, 22 degrees Celsius on track, 16 ambient. So relatively toasty conditions, nothing too extreme in terms of heat. Now, we did see some record high temperatures on the trailing end of last week's broadcast itinerary, with 41 degrees at the Mount Panorama circuit in New South Wales, Australia. Now, I think we're a far cry from territory like that. This is just a little over half of that temperature found here in a much toastier Italy. Then there's a significant difference between calling something toasty and calling something searingly, almost hellish hot. We see here towards the trailing end of free practice, recently up to second place, then Timo de Tosto with McLaren. Now, in spite of the fact, bringing back up those balance of performance statistics, that McLaren is one of 3 manufacturers to be 20 or over in terms of weight gain. This is significant disadvantage on paper to McLaren. De Tosto still makes do. You've got to go to war with what you have, and De Tosto knows this better than anyone in his choices with McLaren. Right now finds himself up the road from Vinicius Gois, currently third in the free practice session by 16 thousandths of a second. Both of them still over half a second out from the fastest time, 1:49.830 by Christian Lebay. It is a pleasant surprise then, coming into the second free practice session of the season, trailing on to the second qualifying of the season, to see that Chevrolet has not been able to pick back up on the form they carried throughout Season 2. Where I believe we got towards the end of that season, I think it was 4 Chevrolet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s. It seems the regulations for the first full championship then of 2026 is... Actually, that might not be the whole case there. I'm pretty sure that season... No, okay, my mistake. So Season 2 was 2026. So this is the second full championship for this series in 2026. Has definitely gone a great ways to deter that single manufacturer dominance. Now, on paper, we could definitely still see Chevrolet reinforce a flawless win record like they held towards the end of Season 2. You can see that it is nowhere near as dominant, namely in point with the newfound cases here for both McLaren and Mercedes. Now, Mercedes was a great heel to Chevrolet's advance last season, but we see them a lot more proactive in their fight against Chevrolet, for control of top 5 positions, and I think that does come part and parcel here of a new driver lineup. Wishful Winnings, of course, moved away from Chevrolet in the trailing end of Season 2 over towards Mercedes, and also in the case here, we see for some other drivers returning to Mercedes' quarters. 607 still strong with the AMG. That's Kevin Quain. It's also worth pointing out Chili Peppers on his move from Aston Martin to Mercedes, but really one of their star signings at the moment, Vinicius Gois of VB Racing, in that 444. Has really, especially on today's circuit, been able to take this under his wing and challenge for those top 5 positions for Mercedes AMG. It's also worth pointing out here, while it's easy to sit there and not root for Chevrolet given how much they dominated last season's grid, there are a few drivers with compelling stories to tell on their new chapter with Chevrolet. First among them that comes to mind here is Byron Forrest, having moved across from Aston Martin to Chevrolet. This marks his 3rd manufacturer currently contributed towards in this season. Hang on just a moment. What on earth has gone on there? We'll be back to you in just a moment's time. Well, apologies for the interruption there. We're not entirely sure what happened our end, but it seems that we're back into the session now, looking at the timing charts just in the final minute, so we got back just in time for the end of free practice before we get in towards qualifying. If you're watching this on the YouTube release, there'll just be a bit of an awkward time jump to give some explanation for that. We had a bit of a surprise outage from our end. Not entirely sure what's gone on there. Hopefully does not repeat itself. But at the end of free practice then, Labay fastest by just over half a second over Timo Tosto, with Vinicius Gois in 3rd place, David Tanguay 4th, and Wishful Winnings in the top 5. Next around the corner then, 20 minutes of qualifying. Now to reiterate on those new regulations, these days it is a staggered qualifying session. First 10 minutes goes over to the AM cars, the last 10 minutes over to the pros, giving further division between the pro and AM side. Now your pros are the drivers with the white placards and your AMs are the ones with the red. So we'll be seeing a lot of those red cars on their way out for the first 10 minutes of qualifying. Then we'll be able to see the pro drivers make their way out on track. Now, of course, these drivers have been able to lay in a lot of these times with double the time they'll have over quali. So it's going to be curious to see how quickly can they replicate some of the magic here from free practice. Only a few more drivers expectant to the line before we get in to the scope of that qualifying session, and we'll wait no longer as we get into 20 minutes of qualifying. So at the 10-minute mark, we'll see the pros released out onto the track, but already you can see movement from further down the paddock by the AM drivers. Now we'll go to catch on board with the one just leading that charge on the way out. That's the Aston Martin, I believe there, of Didier Potvin. Let's go to catch on board here with Potvin on his way out of the pit lane. And so getting a look into those qualifying predictions. Now this stands as an outright statistic, so you're going to have to take this with a grain of salt in the context of the AM Championship. But taking a look here, LeBay predicted at pole position, up and ahead of Wishful Winnings predicted second, with Todd third, Di Tosto fourth, Villorio fifth, Quain sixth, Forrest seventh, Vecchiere in eighth, Simard ninth, and Jeffrey in 10th. So you can see the spread of times there just out past first place is where things really start to close up quite significantly. Taking a look there, some of those gaps in particular, third to fourth between Todd and Di Tosto there were in the scope of about 18 thousandths of a second between the pair. And then from behind from Di Tosto to Villorio, that's about 600ths of a second. Moreover, 65 thousandths between Villorio and Quain. So really it goes on and on and on there. It's looking at a very, very tightly packed top 10, but starting things off then, the charge of the AMs. We see tucking in behind Didier Potvin is Vinicius Goyce. Now we'll just double check the rankings, because if I'm not mistaken, yes, all right, the 444 was not was not a AM driver, as advised by race control to get off the track. So we'll stay on board with the Aston Martin here. This is on with Didier Potvin for the AM Championship, making his way down through to Ravazza. So our unofficial tour guide here of the Autodromo Internazionale, Enzo Idino Ferrari. So then on the exit of Ravazza, turn 18 gives us the run down through to turn 19 on this circuit. Coming up on the left, you can see there, that's the Variante Bassa. That's used in the FIM configuration of this track for motorcycle racing, which, fun fact, is where this track started out. Its first races were ran on 2 wheels before it ever saw racing on 4, in towards the Variante Tamburello, forged into the shape that it is after the tragic events of the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. Sadly claimed the lives of both Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna. But these two chicanes are now formed as breakers for the overall momentum carried through that opening sector. So out through the Variante Villeneuve, we just saw there, turns 5 and 6, in through to turn 7 at Tosa. Now this is one of our first major overtaking opportunities down through the Variantes. Now it's not impossible to see drivers go 2 abreast, but it is incredibly dangerous. So Tosa is often where they choose their chances. Up through turn 8 into turn 9 now at Piratella. Through to the sweeping downhill left-hander at turn 10 on the run towards the Acqua Minerale, possibly the most iconic section of the track here. Down into this dip, then right onto the climb back uphill as we crest around turn 12, up round the brow at turn 13. And atop the hilltop now, making the run in towards the Variante Alta, turns 14 and 15, ultra tight chicane here, characterized by these very high sausage curbs, easy to clip, easy to fumble in that area. So we see on board at the moment, just bringing the telemetry up to our top left-hand side to see currently the timings for Didier Potvin, our unofficial tour guide here, as we head down towards to turn 16, 17 and 18 at Ravazza. Another heavy overtaking opportunity for many drivers attempted across both categories, GT4 and 3, to a mixed bag of success. So already having burned in halfway through our available time for the AM drivers, we see the current default time then by Potvin. Across the line goes the Aston Martin, 1:53.020. Then nearest to the line from behind is the number 96. So that'll be Casey Malles with Chevrolet. Across the line he goes onto a flying lap. So next on our radar here, Cal Ford, the number 484. Then the 616 of Andrew Veldkamp. So 2 Chevys to the line. Goes fastest then by 2 tenths, Cal Ford. Then we wait to see what Veldkamp can do. Down towards the line he goes in the 616. Then from behind him, the 888 coming to the line. That was Brandon Carr going up to 3rd fastest with Aston Martin across the line from behind. Now goes ahead. That's Ruben Pereira with BMW. Nearest to the line, the 692. So we go to catch on board here. And this is with the new driver on the block. This is on with the Mercedes of Adrian Malherbe. We see their trouble at the Variante Alta. This is not going to be the last time we see that here in today's session. A lot of speed being carried up into this very heavy braking zone. Very difficult to posture the car for that area, especially in the GT4s, a much less coercible class of race car compared to their more technical GT3 counterparts. Or even by that metric, some of the other cars that this track shares cohorts with, such as Formula 1, or formerly, I suppose, Formula 1, with last year's 2025 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix being the circuit's last until further notice. Well, down towards the line, Malherbe won't be setting a time off of the back of what's happened down at the Variante Alta. We'll wait to see to the line the 707. That's Stephen Black, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, the BMW goes 6th fastest. Then to the line comes Potvin. Can he recalibrate here and go faster than Ford across the line? Not this time around. The 484 currently down at Ravazza. Waits to see where he'll rank up as the number 96 approaches the line. Casey Miles, 6th fastest with Chevrolet. The 484 still on for the fastest in the AM category. 152.807 across the line he goes, and it's an improvement by about 5 tenths, so just a little shy of 5 tenths of a second there as the 616 approaches the line. So new fastest lap, 152.390. Andrew Velkamp leaps up to second place in both division and currently overall standings. We'll see how that stacks up with the tide of pro drivers queuing for exit with only 3 minutes before they are unleashed onto this track. Ruben Pereira, 4th fastest still then with BMW. A rare sight on the GT4 field. Last time we saw BMW in greater capacity was with Sean Cox last season in his surprising tenure with the Bavarian Motorworks M4. Also having joined BMW's ranks, Stephen Black. Last season spent his time with AMG, now fancies other chances with different German manufacturers. Skipping across to the M4. Nearest to the line, the 692, so we'll go to catch on board here with Adrian Malherbe on the exit of Ravazza. Now, things were a bit of a trouble for him in that last lap just gone. We'll see, though, in what appears to be currently a clean flying lap right in the trailing end of the AM classification qualifying for round 2 of Season 3 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup by Competizione Performance League. It's 8th fastest for Malherbe across the line. The 35 coming to the line. The 707 stays in 7th place then. We'll see where Potvin goes. Up to fastest by 148 thousandths of a second. 96 nearest to the line. Casey Miles, can he breach the classification top 5? Down across the line he goes. He does find an improvement. It's worth pointing that out there for the 96. He still has one more opportunity here on track to make this count. So we'll see what he can do upon the exit of the final flying lap here for the 96. And so it appears that his goose is cooked. 6th fastest in class then for Casey Miles. We see Veldkamp to the line. He's got one more lap left in him here. It's worth pointing that out. About 1 minute and 26 seconds away from the release of the pro drivers onto the track. So these will be among the last laps we see out of the AM drivers in the first of the new staggered qualifying system. We see that bringing things to an end there, Brandon Carr, 4th fastest. So pretty solid things to be considered there in classification for the 888. Nearest to the line, the 707 of Stephen Black. 1 minute left to go then before the release of the pro drivers for the last 10 minutes of the first qualifying, first staggered qualifying, I should say, of the season here in Season 3. An interesting new system. Now, not the first time we've seen a system such as this implemented, albeit it has been with a slightly more rigid classification. That is what we've seen over on HCCL with their handling of GT3 and GT4 qualifying over the course of their multi-class championship. However, this looks to focus a little bit more introspectively to driver classification, less so than vehicle classification. So it's curious to see how this will affect both sides' performance over the course of the season. Obviously, now no longer stepping in each other's way. No one's toes being stepped on from either side of these categories. Across the line goes Black to 6th fastest, now up and ahead of Mals. From behind, the number 35, 152.025, the new fastest time then. by Didier Potvin right in the trailing end, as we see stacked in behind him, about to make their way out. There's the 119. From behind them, the number 5, Richard Cecil. So out go the pro drivers. Wishful Winnings joining them as well. The number 30 of David Tanguay, Vinicius Goyce right behind them. We had a bit of a trip out on track earlier on. 616 coming to the line here. Last driver for the AM classification across the line. Veldkamp third. There on his cool down lap. All of the AM drivers now coming in. So we're going to go and catch on board with the leading pros out onto the track, as we see a big shake-up there in that lineup, with trouble for Richard Cecil down through both of the opening Variantes, Tambirello and Villeneuve. That's ultimately dropped him down behind Wishful Winnings in the AMG. Could see him drop out further behind David Tanguay and Vinicius Goyce in the opening charge here with 9 minutes. Of course, time is money. With half the available time they've had since the last round at Brands Hatch, the pros have really got to make this one count here. Any kind of slip-ups now, especially as we get into the longer tracks later down the line in this season, can cost them dearly. Part of me still longs for the idea of the return of the one-shot quali system from Season 2, where we saw the 2 qualifying sessions split up into 2 broadly different themes across the double sprint format. The second qualifying saw the podium finishers of the first race in the doubleheader only compete for 1 available flying lap, whether it banked or not. That definitely did raise the stakes on what gave us some very exciting qualifyings over the course of the last season. With this new system in place, we'll see how effective it is by comparison. Heading down to the line then, Labay for the first of our flying laps. On board then with the 119. This is definitely something to take note of for later down the line in both races set to follow in today's session. Just how eager the Chevrolet is to be able to attack those curbs. Now, Imola is an often cited car killer, but that's more or less up in GT3. GT4s are a little too slow to feel some of the more pronounced effects of hitting the curbs at the speeds that they are. That's not to say they won't feel anything, but the Chevrolet will be almost practically numb compared to some of its contemporaries on this grid. So this could play quite nicely into Labay's hands. Now, we already know he's geared up for a potential pole position under predictions, and also based off of the data we just took from free practice earlier on today. And this could definitely be part of that recipe for success. Not only is he confident with the machine is confident with the track. There doesn't really seem to be any key areas of weakness for the Chevrolet. Its major issues stemming from balance of performance more so than acclimatization to the circuit itself. This seems to be more than definitely the perfect playground for the Camaro. High curbs don't really do an awful lot to a car that's already floaty in its stock form, so that softer suspension is going to really work wonders on these flying laps. And so far, it has been absolutely fantastic so far. Near flawless lap from Labay, so this is quite a heavy precedent to follow into the first flying lap for the pros. Of course, Didier Potvin on for the AM podium, on for AM pole, I should say. Labay then fastest 149.872. From behind him to the line was the number 230, if I'm not mistaken. There, no, I'm blind. 233. That was Wishful Winnings. He sadly did not set a flying lap. Trouble for Richard Cecil in that opening flying lap, as he finds himself actually tucked in behind a majority of the AM drivers. And that's almost the same case here for Anthony Valorio. Only 4 fastest tucked in behind Didier Potvin. Kevin Quain, 3rd fastest. Vinicius Goyce in 2nd. Byron Forrest in 4th. Only 800ths worth pointing out there between himself and Quain. New 2nd fastest time by Vincent Simard. So a Chevy 1-2 at the moment. But suffice it to say, I'm doubtful that we'll see another Chevy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 so early on in the season. I think it is perhaps the time for other manufacturers to dominate those top 5s. We're seeing equal competition there for the top 5 positions in the pros at the moment between Mercedes and Chevrolet. Now, these two did share a lot of that top 10 in a wider scale throughout last season, so things getting a little bit tighter between the two dominant manufacturers. Aston Martin, though, definitely spearheading a new charge, and we saw, especially in that last round as well, the case for McLaren. One manufacturer that I imagine is just happy to be here is Alpine, currently heralded the only Alpine left on this grid for today's round, the number 41 of Anthony Valorio. A driver who has perhaps traded his opportunities with more competitive vehicles by contrast, such as the McLaren 570S, just sighted there in the background, driven by Timo de Tosto, for a more enjoyable offering with Alpine. Ultimately, that's going to boost his morale as a driver, and where he may have been floundering for results in his last couple of visits to this season because of struggling up against the McLaren, he does seem to be far more relaxed, and we saw it through Brands Hatch as well, that he was having a lot more fun in his drive with the A110. So he's really gone for an approach here of smiles per gallon for the number 41. We see here the Alpine down towards the line and looks to reunite there with the rest of the pro standings, and actually not too far off a shout of the nearest position. From behind him, it was Timo de Tosto to breach the second barrier. Then following in through is Kevin Quain. Now 3 drivers, now that makes 4 with the introduction of Byron Forrest, to be separate from Labay's fastest by less than a second. Presently then, we're seeing a pretty sizable spread for the Chevrolets. Only 3 positions in the top 5. They still remain the dominant manufacturer of the top 5, but nowhere near as closely centered around the front as they were last season. This is quite an even spread we're seeing. Across the line a moment ago, we also saw Jeffrey, the number 42. Adam Jeffrey, who had been registered for this season before Brands Hatch, sadly couldn't make an appearance in the opening round, but now joins us here for round 2. We'll have double the races to play with in today's round, with the first double sprint of the season. Nearest to the line then, the 119, so we go to catch on board here with Christian Labay. Back towards the line. Bear in mind, fastest time at the moment, 1:49.680. Put that up against the qualifying predictions from earlier on, and we're really not too far off that expectation, and we see already another improvement, 1:49.545. New fastest lap there by Labay. So we're getting closer and closer to those chances of seeing those predicted times make their way in. Bear in mind, there's still that pressing factor of the half amount of time in this session over free practice for these drivers to execute on these ideas. We also see up into the top 3 a moment ago, Wishful Winnings in the number 233 Mercedes. Vinicius Goyce up to 4th. Byron Forrest pushed down to 5th. We'll see, though, what the fight back chances are, as he's only 5 thousandths away before that last lap just gone to David Tanguay behind. Now he's put more than enough distance up over, and it's 500ths away from Wishful Winnings behind, as he now takes the last of those podium spots. Nearest target in sight then, off by 140 thousandths of a second. That's a 10th and 400ths is Timo de Tosto with McLaren. So it is still very, very tight here when you choose to not consider the leading car. That still resides then as being Christian Labay. It's often something perhaps overlooked with this series is the fact that looking through those qualifying results, it's usually always the same result that we've seen. Labay has dominated qualifying for greater parts of things throughout the last 2 seasons, now into our 3rd here on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup. But looking in further behind, it has been a unanimous case in all 3 seasons so far that the grid has been incredibly tightly packed together in behind the leader. You can see that it is a very, very close margin at play. 100th between Goyce and Winnings. Not even 600ths, 500ths between Forrest and Winnings 3rd through 4th. So that makes by proxy 600ths between Forrest and Goyce. Still residing as the fastest lap at the moment as Labay peels into the pit lanes. 1:49.545 then the time to beat for the rest of the field. Bear in mind, for the majority of the drivers here, we see quite a sizable snake of cars making its way through Ravazza. So for plenty, they'll still have one more opportunity on track here before the session is out. We see for De Tosto, can he breach back into that half-second margin in the 58? Down across the line, he goes very nearly. He's within 25 thousandths of being on that accolade. Meanwhile, for Forrest, can he make his way up towards De Tosto? Not this time around. We see that Quain is advancing from behind here. 7 thousandths up over Wishful Winnings to 4th place, pushing Winnings to the back of the top 5, and it's getting closer in range there to Byron Forrest. That currently resides at a gap of 43 thousandths across the line a moment ago to mark the final flying lap that he's got in this session here. The number 161 of Dylan Vekere finishes qualifying at the best of times in 9th place. 235 thousandths up over the nearest car, being the Alpine of Anthony Valorio, who finishes this session in the top 10. Clinton Bourne calls it quits from 11th, and we see there for Adam Jeffrey in 12th at the end of this session. Chili Peppers on a perhaps session to forget there, up in the pro category, but finishes behind 2 of the AM cars, behind Ford and Potvin, and also as well as Richard Cecil sandwiched in between the pair of them to make 16th. Nearest to the line then, we do see very, very late entry is George Todd, the driver who was scorned from that race win. Of course, we saw him across the line first among the fray last time out in Brands Hatch. Race control inevitably, upon further investigation, had that off of him. As mentioned earlier on, that 20-second time penalty for his incident earlier on in the Brands Hatch round with Bourne is ultimately what came back to bite him on the backside in his final results. Across the line, it's 12th fastest for Todd, so he's got his work cut out for him here in both races to follow. Nearest to the line, the number 5 for Richard Cecil from 15th as he crosses the line there, 13th at the end of the session, pushing Adam Jeffrey down to 14th. Nearest to the line, the 58 stays second, Forrest from behind. Up in front of him there was Sanchez. Sanchez finishes the session 16th, Forrest in 3rd. So still an exciting qualifying to be had. I wouldn't say this one is wrapped up so nice, neat and tidy for LeBay. He does have ample company there from quite a few drivers. Looking at that spread of times, taking a look just in between 3rd down to 6th. So this encompasses 4 cars and all of them within 600ths of a second of one another. The closest gap we have is 7 thousandths. That resides between Quain and Winnings. So this is super, super close margins we have at play here in today's qualifying. Actually, the closest margin overall, not just including the gap we were talking about there. The closest margin overall is a 0. And as it's the level time there between Cal Ford and Chili Peppers, both of which 2.845 seconds away from the fastest time. They are dead level down to the 1,000th. So that really does go quite a long way to describe just how precise these qualifying sessions round out at here in this series. It's easy to overlook that when you have the same drivers gunning towards the front every qualifying, but it is still super, super close, and we'll be curious to see how it unfolds. Of course, the first staggered qualifying did lead to a little bit of trouble for some, as we've seen there a few drivers lagging in behind the AM category. It's even been a case where Potvin has really been punching above his weight in today's round. That could be definitely the case to consider with Aston Martin. It's been a case here where some drivers have struggled against the new regulations. Ultimately, this is something that will later be carried down the line in those evaluations towards the halfway mark of the season. Now, before we get into the look of the first grid of today, now, of course, both grids will be based off of the qualifying results you see here. We'll get a full look through it for the first time and then a more brief look of it in the second race just to give us a refresher. Before we get to that, though, as we see the grid form up with 3 minutes before the opening formation lap, we have an article of news. Now, that's one per grid, as we'll get into the second one a little later down the line. But the first of our articles of news comes from the world of Formula One. BYD, the Chinese automaker that has swept the market in the last couple of years, is investigating a possible entry into the world of motor racing, citing its claims at a possible 12-team slot on the Formula One grid. Now, this is still very early in discussions, but they are actively investigating opportunities to enter motorsport, whether that means through Formula One, which is something that has been mentioned already, is something they're willing to consider. This marks one of the largest increases in interest from the Chinese auto market in Formula One since the sport's inception in 1950. This could make a landmark change on the grid. Of course, latest to add to the Formula One lineup, the 11th team being Cadillac, having joined us just this year, having completed their first race at the Australian Grand Prix just gone by. The 12th team just around the corner, possibly. This could make for quite an interesting next couple of years for Formula One. Now, BYD has already stated that not only is Formula One possibly on the radar, but plenty of other options as well. I'd say more realistically, for the brands that we've seen make a variety of different vehicles, we could definitely see like another automaker to come from China, Lynk & Co. They could be eyeing up a possible TCR slot. Now, of course, F1 was one that was explicitly mentioned. It's what's been buzzing around the radar for some time here. So that is what we're currently reporting on. We'll see how valid those claims are on later down the line. Possibly by 2027, we could be hearing more concrete news on this move towards Formula One. But for now, these are mostly just speculations. What isn't a speculation, though, is the grid for today. Getting a look here with a minute before the start of the formation lap here for race 1 of 2 at round 2. On the Imola double sprint here in Season 3. Christian Lebay on pole position with Timo de Tosto in second place. Byron Forrest up into third with Kevin Quain fourth. Wishful Winnings in fifth with Vinicius Goyce in sixth. David Tanguay in seventh. Vincent Simard eighth. Dylan Beckeret in ninth. And Anthony Valorio rounds out the top 10. Taking a look then from 11th down to 20th, we have Bourne, Todd, Cecil, Jeffrey, Potvin, Sanchez, Ford, Peppers, Veldkamp and Carr. And then from 21st to 26th to round out the rest of the grid, we have Pereira, Black, Mals, Malherbe, Jackal and Granados. With a 30-second warning shown then, let's catch on board with the 119 to take us away on the formation lap. We'll leave you on board with Lebay. We'll be back to you in just a moment's time. So then looking on with the opening formation lap as we just round out through Tosa. This area of the track, the tighter middle sector, is where a lot of the action could boil over. Of course, that first major overtaking opportunity running in through to Tosa. Now, we have seen, as mentioned before, drivers attempt overtakes and possibly be successful on them out through the run of Tambirello and then later through the Variante Villeneuve. Now, that's a very high-risk area of the track. Really, only the discerning few will dare attempt a move such as that. We see the bulk of those overtakes do often tend to culminate down at turn 7. Heading in through the middle sector, then we have seen plenty of options for side-by-side battling, but most of it boils down here, down through the Aqua Minerale, where drivers are often forced to go back into single-file racing. It's often here, then, if you can get a good run out of the Aqua Minerale, it's for the run up towards the Variante Alta, where drivers can possibly stage an offensive. Now, often do you have to be right up alongside your opponent and force them to capitulation, because going side by side down through here is borderline suicide. Now, I say that as if it's not been attempted before. We've been proven wrong in the past, but in the much more white-knuckle world of GT4 racing, things often do end in disaster for moves such as that. So do not be surprised if it's attempted and failed on today's grid. Now, that's not any caliber of the driver's fault there. This is simply a case we are going up against machines that are very, very close to road-going machinery here. And they are much more limited in what they can and can't do over the more thoroughbred racing machines we see up in GT3. Nonetheless, they trace their heritage to the same point, all to the same Looking onto the grid then, 26 cars in all, 25 of which out on track, one from the pit lane being the 707 of Stephen Black, making our way down towards the line then for the first of two races today. 30 minutes against the clock here in Imola, race 1 of 2 of round 2, Season 3, the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series makes its way down towards the line here in the former home of the San Marino turned Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Down towards the line then. McLaren against Chevrolet on the front row. Mercedes against Chevrolet on the second. Mercedes all on the third row. Let's see how it all boils over. Race 1 of 2 here in Imola. As we make the long procession down towards the line is Green and Racing. And we get a great start then from the front row. The 58 and the 119 peel away from the rest of the field on our run down towards the Variante Tamburello for the first time. But we see catching up to them is the number 824 and the 607 looking to give them competition down through Tamburello for the first time. A great start then from LeBay. A bit of a rocky start there for Di Tosto as he looks to be increasingly vulnerable to advances from the rest of the field. Looking to catch on board with the 824. We see here with Byron Forrest having tucked in behind that of Kevin Crane. It's Vinicius Goyce to go up and around the outside, then to the inside at the Variante Villeneuve. An exuberant start then from Vinicius Goyce as immediately put under pressure the 824 of Byron Forrest. Meanwhile, we see the 58 remedy some of its early troubles through Tamburello. Now as we exit Tosa on the run up towards Piratella, Timo Di Tosto continues command of second. We see here for Forrest v Goyce, this is a fantastic ensemble. Now joining the fray from behind is Wish for Winnings and Dylan Vecchiere on the run in through Piratella, down through turn 10, in towards the Aqua Minerale for the first time. That Mercedes practically pushing the Chevrolet down through to turns 11 and 12. Up round turn 13 we go, in towards turn 14. We see here all of these cars pressed up against one another. This could end in disaster, and for some it already has, as the 357 appears to be in trouble towards the back of the field. Looking to catch on board, it was the 888 and the 357 to be in trouble. As we see they're peeling out to one side, looks to already be trouble for another driver. That's the number 8. The BMW there, Ruben Pereira, we see here with Anthony Valorio, forced down 8 positions on the race start, possibly 9, as he now looks to be taken for ransom by Chili Peppers. Up in front was contact there between Casey Miles and the Mercedes of, I believe they're looking at it, not the Mercedes, sorry, the Aston of Didier Potvin, down through to Ravazza for the first time. Well, we're back into green flags, but it's a brazen start towards the back of the field. Getting a look in with some of the other drivers here. We see with Kevin Quain now looking to challenge for second place. Meanwhile, LeBay continues to break away, currently 1.4 seconds clear of Di Tosto in second. Quain v Goyce, though, for a new Mercedes second row, I should say, off of what started as a Mercedes third row. Quain holds position in his fight previously with Forrest, now having fallen down to 5th. As we see here, George Todd has been carving his way through the field. A driver who crossed the line first among the fray in Brands Hatch. Ultimately, that race win stolen away after a post-race investigation saw him liable to a 22nd time penalty. We see, though, that it's done very little to dull the blade that is the number 12, as he's already onto that charge 3 minutes in and up several positions on this grid. We see trouble in the back. It's for Bourne, the Chevrolet in imminent trouble. We see already in the pit lane the number 5 looking to catch on board here. We see facing the wrong way on the exit of Piratella, Clinton Bourne dives to the gravel to avoid further conflict with any approaching drivers. Ruben Pereira and Eric Granados look to get up past as the number 6 rejoins the tarmac. So taking a look then after the first 2 laps coming up on here, we see it's LeBay from Di Tosto, Quain 3rd, Goyce 4th, Forrest in 5th, Vecchiere behind in 6th, winning 7th. We see behind them is actually no, up and ahead of them is Tanguay, as Winnings now drops behind them to 8th place. Todd right behind him then in 9th. Adam Jeffrey rounds out the top 10. It's worth pointing out, though, in the case of Jeffrey, Ford is hunting him down. We see a little bit of contact there, dare I say it, between Winnings and Todd. Bump draft from the number 12 on the number 233. We see very aggressive cover off there by Winnings. Could that be constituted as swerving? That was super, super late on there for the 233. Did definitely throw a bit of a blindsider onto the number 12. That could have risked a big incident further down the line. Very elbows out defending tactics then from Winnings to keep Todd at bay. Looking further up the line, we are seeing much closer engagement here for third between Quain and Goist. Now, it's worth pointing out, both of them seem to be gaining some degree of ground up on Timo de Tosta. We can see the gap is still very, very close between third and second, physically speaking there, on a run in towards Piratella. Meanwhile, we see here Forest v Vekere, half a second in between the pair. We see for Forest, it was a bit of a troubled start for the Chevrolet, was taking things nice and steady. And ultimately, that opened up an opportunity for Vinicius Gois, who has really been on a lively start here with Mercedes, gunning already for a chance at the podium. Bear in mind, his first season in, second round in. It's currently his second race in on said second round. So for Vinicius Gois, he has really had a lively start to the season, it's worth saying. Seeing here with Byron Forrest v Dylan Vekere v David Tanguay, a three-way split, so it resides there for these three. Catching on board then with Byron Forrest. Presently defending then 5th place away from the approaching pair. From behind them, you can still see ongoing as the fight for 8th place. Wishful Winnings versus George Todd. You can see off in the distance ahead of Forrest is the scope of the top 4. The bright canary yellow Mercedes, the 444, marking current position of Vinicius Gois. We see attempting a bit of a blindside there was David Tanguay. Now, just having a look in with Tanguay as he's tucked in behind Dylan Vekere. This is on with the number 30. Now, by proxy fighting for 5th place locally, though, we are fighting for 6th up against the number 161 Aston Martin, with which he has attempted several times to blindside with these fake-out moves. Still glued super, super close then to the back of Dylan Vekere. Bear in mind, their continued struggle is only going to allow more ground to be gained from the leading of that three-way fight for 5th. 824 of Byron Forrest. In towards Aqua Minerali. More trouble finds its way over to the number 6. Taking a look in towards the back of the field here. It's gone from bad to worse in the case of Clinton Bourne. Now further issues found him on the exit of the Variante Villeneuve. This could be not far off a chance here of him sitting out this first race. We see he's not the first driver to find himself with great misfortune. Richard Cecil was caught up in the opening flurry in today's racing incidents. And he finds himself down 26th on the field. Looking back in then, the fight there of Tanguay v Vekere as it now comes to a head with the number 30 having got up and ahead in the time since. We see though, he's left himself a bit open on the run through Ravazza. Wider line, a little touch there on the gravel, so that allows for the Aston Martin, as we see there on our left-hand side, to come sneaking up into the side draft on the number 30 Chevrolet. Now, ultimately, where Vekere's positioned, he will find his way to the inside at Tambirello. The question therein remains whether he has the bottle to keep it there, as we see for Vekere holding all the way on the left. The number 30 on the racing line technically, but is cut off at the first part of Tambirello. So the Aston really did go for a bit of a wing and a prayer send on the exit of Tambirello, going all the way out wide. Almost looked bumped out there from the number 30. We'll take a look on the replays, as things did look a little bit dicey just before the run at Villeneuve. Take a look here. And was that, it looked certainly like it could have been a kick up the backside there for the 161 from the number 30. As you see there on the exit of Tosa, Tanguay runs out wide again. So the 161 has got the chance here to continue pressuring the Chevrolet for position. It's been some grand stuff inside of that top 10. Quickly getting a look outside of that top 10 reveals a very close train of cars. Among them, we see the Jackal, Vincent Simard, Didier Potvin, as well as Ivan Sanchez just up in front. We see Anthony Valorio in 13th for the moment, the number 6 into the pit lane. This could very well be the round, the first race of 2 in today's round over for Clinton Bourne as he comes into the pits. Continued struggle from the number 6. It's been somewhat of a cascade effect as we see on board with the Jackal. This is an interesting one to see here. Caught in the middle of this fight. Sanchez in front, Simard behind, Potvin not too far off their trails, with Peppers not too far off of that of Potvin. So it could very well be in the aggregate of a 5-car split for the control of 14th place. Sanchez currently defending for what he can here, but with a better run on the exit of the Acqua Minerali to Variante Alta section, I should say, on the run in towards Ravazza. Looks to be the case, the 999 up the inside on the 91. Can there be a fighting chance presented here by Mercedes? As that gap remains open, slotting in through was the 120 Vincent Simard. Made light work there at that position, very nearly left it open for a third arrival from the Aston Martin of Didier Potvin. Now getting a look on board here with Sanchez, we see Potvin is looking to do a much similar strategy to what we saw in the fight of Tanguay v Vecchia. This time between the two sister cars, the AMG and the Vantage. The Vantage up the inside. Potvin looking to go later onto the brakes. Is that going to be to his detriment? No, it actually goes earlier onto the brakes as it's revealed there. The camera's a little deceiving. Ultimately then continuing that charge forward up to 14th goes the Jackal with Vincent Simard close in company. Taking a look here, Vinicius Goyce now third with Quain down to 4th in the time last since covered. After 10 minutes of racing, we see not too far away from either of these two Mercedes cars is the 824 of Byron Forrest looking to return to that podium position. The two Mercedes cars very eager on the start. Has that ultimately caused a bit of long-term pain for such short-term gain? We see here very enthusiastic for track limits, that is, up through the Variante Alta. Vinicius Goyce, should he continue to take corners so liberally, could definitely find himself with a penalty slapped on for those track limits a little later on. Getting a look in then with some of the other battles on track. Looking to catch in then. We see here Vecchia v Tanguay still rages on upon the exit of Ravazza. This is currently for 6th place then. Vecchia versus Tanguay. Tanguay with the longer gears on that number 30, so he has got better straight line speed over the Aston, but by benefit of being in that side draft, now has to tuck back into the slipstream. Vecchia is able to cling on much closer than Tanguay would have liked. You can see trying to hold centre mass of the road, possibly faking out a move to the inside, but Tanguay's no fool. He knew he had the line for the run in through Tamburello, stuck to it, ultimately holds on now back into 6th. So far it has been very lively racing indeed. The front still somewhat decided here for Lebay, having put 4.6 seconds up over the nearest car, being Timo de Tosto currently 2nd place. And really it does seem to be a case that for the wider scale of the podium at large, it has spread out by quite a distance here. Vinicius Goyce now up to 3rd place, has 3.8 seconds between himself and Timo de Tosto. Kevin Quain 1.5 seconds behind, and it's worth pointing out here Byron Forrest has been playing things for the longer term. That opening half where, yes, definitely it could be argued that the Chevrolet was left a bit sleeping there on the opening couple of laps, has definitely made up sizable ground in the time since. We see here for Tanguay in his continued fights with Vecchia, these two actually having fallen in now behind two Mercedes cars in their continued fighting. So clearly an indicator of a incident just a moment ago that we sadly missed in amongst the chaos of today's race, where these two have now dropped in behind 2 positions now, giving ground over to Todd and Winnings. George Todd now up to 6th in this race. You see here for Forrest v Quain, straight line speed we know is in the court of Chevrolet. So for Byron Forrest, he is going to see much greater benefit, especially given the fact he's in the slipstream right now of the 607 in these next couple of laps. It's what's going to allow him to really tap into the back end of that 607. He's just going to be able to reel in Quain on that opening straight. That long run out through turn 18 all the way in towards turn 2 here is where that Chevrolet just has so much ground to give for very little effort required. It's just got that natural straight line speed over the majority of the grid. Now, again, another manufacturer with this key advantage will be McLaren. It's the reason they've not been caught, is A, parts of that straight line speed, B, is the superior maneuverability of the 570S over the AMG GT, and C, the continued fighting that occupied the opening half of this race between Goyce and Quain. Quain now has his plate full here with a new arrival from the 824 looking to challenge back in to those top 2 rows. And after 14 minutes of racing, Forrest really doesn't seem to be losing any steam here Whereas the 607 in its continued fights with the 444 has cooked its tyres out a little too early for Quain's likings. This could be a bit of trouble for him coming up just around the corner. Or even perhaps before that. We see here with Byron Forrest tucking his way onto that rear quarter. Earlier on the brakes here to allow the 607 to get ahead of himself and possibly overcommit to the corner. We see though, 824, he's got him on the line. There's not a great deal Quain can do to shake him off. Forrest has played things nice and safe, and for his efforts, he's rewarded with much better tyre longevity at the halfway. From behind, we see Todd and Winnings separate by nearly a full second here, 8/10 as it stood. From behind them, that continued fight. This time, Vekere up and ahead of Tanguay down through Ravazza. So every single time we catch back on with these two, they're in the midst of some insane battle. This time it's for 8th place. Looking in here with David Tanguay. Bear in mind now the number 8 has been towed to the pits, that being Ruben Pereira with BMW. You see a bit of overcommit to the first couple of corners there down at Tamburello. Very nearly the same incident that we saw earlier between these two, where you can make the argument it looked like the number 161 was shoved on the exit of Tamburello. We see this as a much cleaner running of things so far, but these two adamant to hold things side by side. I must say, this is some grand fighting we're seeing between Vekere and Tanguay, but not to be distracted by it. We do have the considerations of that upcoming fight for 4th as they crest the brow on the run in towards Piratella. That's between Quain and Forrest. We see here, though, following in their footsteps, Tanguay looking up the inside here on Vekere. Is it a bit too risky to commit to? Absolutely being the case there. That's why he's backed off on the run through turn 9, now out through turn 10 into turn 11. You see for Tanguay, he is not letting up on this continued fight. And we see there running out wide, the 161 ultimately rolled out the red carpet for the arrival of the number 30. Looking up and ahead here, George Todd versus Wishful Winnings has exploded into full swing in terms of their current fight for 6th. So let's go and catch on board with the Mercedes cars and what is looking to be a very exciting installment of their most recent fighting. Watching on then with Wishful Winnings, George Todd in 6th. These two very close in that middle sector. They make their way through sector 3. You see up in front of them there, that's Byron Forrest, who has in the time since lost considerable ground over his advances to Kevin Quain. So it appears there that either the 607 had a lot more in the back pocket than we were aware of at the time, or there has been a further issue for the 824 to have knocked him down off of that chance to pursue for 4th. Bear in mind, a lot has been going on in the background of these fights we've been watching on with. It's one of the more frustrating aspects of having such a lively race. It's the fact that you can't have eyes absolutely everywhere. We do see, though, for one such fight, we see currently the split of 3 cars in all. Brandon Carr at the back in the turquoise Aston Martin. Then we see chiefly in front the fight between the 2 Mercedes cars of Sanchez and Peppers. Peppers up the inside on the run towards Tamburello, commits to it up the inside, then sticks to the racing line through the second part then of the Variante Tamburello. And number 24 up to 17th, up over Ivan Sanchez. We see tucked in behind them there. Almost thought we lost track of him. It was the number 888 of Brandon Carr. Bear in mind, moved away from the cars in front of him. Spent his first time in this series with Mercedes, moved over to Aston Martin, and it's definitely been a choice worth making for him because he's found himself a lot livelier by comparison. He's stuck into these fights for a lot longer than he was with Mercedes at the time. Another close fight to consider, Miles v Malherbe. For Adrian Malherbe, it's been a bit more of a calm drive here, just sort of establishing that baseline, hanging in towards the back of the field, not trying to stick his neck out here into any fights. Trying to scope up the grid as and when he can. We see for the 233 versus the number 12, George Todd versus Wishful Winnings, still about half a second between the two as they make their way round through Ravazza. As for the previous fight between the 161 and the 30, we see that is now dissolved out by 1.5 seconds between the pair. We see here the 120 commit to a lunge up the inside on his teammate, the 616 of Andrew Velkamp. Vincent Simard leaving very little up to scraps here for that choice of 13th. The twin Chevrolets at the 120 and the 616. quite the hefty move. Ultimately, this is paving the road for a fight for 12th place with Anthony Valorio in the Alpine. Looking to reunite himself with the bulk of traffic in the Pro category. One car stands in his way. Currently leading in the AMS is Cal Ford in the 484 Chevrolet. We see the 41 is catching up on him. We take a look back in with Todd v Winnings. We see them at a real flashpoint in their rivalry so far on track. Todd with a bit of a suboptimal run of the exit of turn 7 has opened himself up to an advance from the 233 here. Wishful Winnings is getting incredibly close to his chances of fighting proper for 6th place down through to Aqua Minerale. The 233 has been super glued to the back end of the number 12 for greater parts of this fight. We see a little bit of a step out there on the exit of turn 12 into turn 13. Now on the run up through towards the Variante Alta. Very unlikely to see full commit to ascend here. Often you really do have to be supplanted right up alongside your rivals to make that move stick. Both of them having a bit of a wobble on the exit of Alta. Down towards Ravazza, we see already preemptively holding the inside line. Was the number 12 tucking back out onto the racing line as the 233 commits to a lunge. They're front to rear on the run through to Ravazza, holding their line and still holding on to position. So it appears is the number 12 on the second part of Ravazza, though. It's the 233 with the better run. We'll see how it balances out through turn 19, though, onto lap 11. As they look to hold this line all the way on the run up towards the Variante Tamburello. Now tucked in behind them is David Tanguay, and you can see the dramatic difference in straight line speed between Chevrolet and Mercedes. We see Mercedes commit up the inside here. The 233 so close to contact with the number 12, but bear in mind all of that pushing and shoving between Todd and Winnings is inviting in David Tanguay. And on the exit of Tamburello, looking up the inside at Villeneuve, the number 30 has got the run for it up over the 233. That's up one Mercedes. Now with the second in his sights, he slides out through Tamburello down towards Tosa, holding the inside line, knowing the 233 would go for a counter-attack early. We see on the exit of Tosa, he'll try not to bite off more than he can chew here. We have seen a bit of trouble on corner exit for the number 30 Chevrolet in terms of understeer. We saw that more presently in his fight earlier on with the car just hanging in the background there. Dylan Vecchiere with Aston Martin. Right now, though, we're seeing an exhilarating three-way fight between these three cars here. Wishful Winnings in the 233 Mercedes, recently introduced to the mix, having slotted his way in between these two on the run through Tamburello on this lap alone, being David Tanguay in the number 30 Chevrolet. Surprisingly enough, actually eclipsed there for the first time by a Mercedes, the number 12 of George Todd. Got to catch on board with these three then. We see here with Wishful Winnings right now riding the rear bumper of the number 30. Now he is not looking to back off on intensity here. He's been hunting down position. He does not care for the brand or shape of car in front of him. He wants 6th place, and really he is pursuing it with every fibre of his being here on the run out through Ravazza. Winnings, who spent part of last season on his debut drive-in with Chevrolet, seems to find himself far more confident on his move now to Mercedes. A car just a bit more permissible in the corners has given him so much more confidence behind the wheel. Now, of course, we've seen Winnings before up in GT3. That was way back in a few seasons ago on VSR Phoenix. Here in GT4, he is still the same lively driver from whence we saw before with Ferrari. On his move to Mercedes, then down in GT4, things have been very exciting indeed. A little bit of desync there on our end, watching on with Wishful Winnings. So we see an exchange of hands there between the 30 and the 12. The 233 did try to peek his way up the inside. May just have his chances on the number 12. You can see just how tightly packed they are. That's almost reminiscent of a bit of a T-pack maneuver in police pursuit terminology, as the two MRT cars blocked him in on the run through Tosa. He couldn't find ground out on his right, couldn't find ground up and ahead. So now out through Piratella, the number 12 and the number 30 exchange positions then on the exit of Villeneuve. Now in through to Aqua Minerale. We see here from Winnings' point of view his continued pursuit of the number 12 and the number 30. But with Tanguay given much cleaner air to play with, this could be an advance later down the line to 5th. But with only 6 minutes left to go, those chances remain incredibly slim. Well, we'll catch on with that fight in a moment's time, but having a look here in the middle of that fray, George Todd, having dropped out of 6th place, playing more of the team game here with his fellow MRT contemporaries, leading in both categories in the current run of the team's championship. Now, sadly, we don't have a comprehensive look of everything because we are unable to categorize by overall. Hopefully, as and when that becomes a feature, will we have a more rounded understanding of that team's championship. What we do know is that across both categories at the moment, MRT appears to be leading 58 and 59 points respectively. Side by side, we see here between Todd and Winnings, the two Mercedes cars very nearly clash heads here on the run in towards that of the Variante Tamburello. It did look to be a tiny bit of contact between the pair of them on the run around turn 2. Now through turn 3 and turn 4, number 12 given a bit of breathing space. And bear in mind, we now see a newfound battle here, Simard v Valorio. Now this is really some David and Goliath stuff. Taking a look in between these two, the Alpine 1.8 litre inline 4 up against a 6.2 litre V8 engine. Number 12 given a drive-through penalty for track limits. That's for George Todd. So it seems that bad luck continues to follow him here into race 1 of 2 at round 2 of the championship, after it found him the first time in the post-race investigations of round 1. The man simply cannot catch a break, so it seems. With just shy of 5 minutes left to go, that's really put a hamper on what the number 12 feels capable of doing on this session. We see nonetheless here from Anthony Valorio, stellar defense in the Alpine. You can see the difference it has up over Chevrolet in terms of its corner-to-corner performance in that tight middle sector. It is a real playground here for the titular A110. A car that knows how to navigate a tight road, obviously tracing its heritage to the former 1960s, 1970s Alpine A110 that competed in the World Rally Championships. We see, though, a bit of a less than ideal exit on the Acqua Minerale did leave him open down towards the Variante Alta. It's a very late commit onto the brakes, but the 120 finds the better line by going earlier onto the brakes. So now up the inside on the run towards Rivazza. We know how solid rear engine cars can be under the brakes. We beg the question, though, what can Valorio find on the run towards Rivazza? Now he'll be tucked in on that slipstream of the 120, knowing that he can't hold a candle in terms of straight line speed, but he can buy his time for the next run through to Sector 2. On to Sector 1 we go then. 3.5 minutes left to go. Valorio drops to 12th. That'll be a net neutral position for him as he now finds the rise up through to 11th. Tucked away in the distance, Cal Ford, still as it appears they're leading in the AMs, but Andrew Veldkamp has a thing or two to say about that. We can see not too far away from him that lead for the AM race win here in race 1 of 2 is very much so still underway. The number 12 clears its drive-through penalty with 3 minutes left to go in today's racing session. So taking a look back in after the recent changes then of position between Valorio and Simard. Simard's promoted to a top 10 position. Valorio hooked in behind in 11th. As it stands, though, before we get to the checkered flag, Labay in the lead, De Tosto second, Goyce third, Quain fourth, Forrest fifth, Tanguay sixth, Winnings in seventh, Vekere in 8th place, having dropped in behind the Mercedes now, the number 233. You see here Jeffrey 9th, Simard in 10th, Valorio in 11th. Ford in 12th, Veldkamp 13th, Jackal 14th, Potvin 15th, Carr 16th, Pepper 17th, Todd 18th, Sanchez 19th, and Malherbe in 20th. Granados 21st, Miles 22nd, Black 23rd, Cecil 24th, Pereira and Bourne soft DNFs of this round then, 25th and 26th respectively. Lucas in chat saying impossible watch on Xbox, just on phone. Yeah, I think that seems to be somewhat of a universal case here for the Twitch Xbox clients. It's really buggy, I found as well. So you're not alone in that boat there, mate. So as the majority of those battles around the top 15 start to simmer down on the closing laps of race 1 of 2, don't go anywhere as we'll get to do this all over again for another 30 minutes of racing to follow into race 2 today. Trailing off the back of a very lively start to racing here in round 2. Race 1 has given us a lot to talk about in terms of those battles. We see one potentially coming down to the wire here as we cross into the scope of the final handful of laps available in today's session. The 357 of Eric Granados versus the number 692 of Adrian Malherbe. That's for 20th place on the field. Mercedes versus Audi. You see what looks to be a bit of trouble here for Brandon Carr. Yes, that does appear to be the case. He drops in behind Casey Malz. So for Malherbe v Granados, this is actually going to be a promotion up a position. So this is now for the fight of 19th. The Audi onto the grass, and really big trouble very nearly finds its way there to Eric Granados. Adrian Malherbe runs very late into the corner, but Granados follows him for that very questionable run through the Variante Tamburello. Bear in mind, we're about to cross into that final lap of racing, courtesy of the number 119 in the time since we just saw there, the 3:57 up and ahead of the 6:92. So Eric Granados moves up to 19th place. Taking a look in with some of the other fights, we just catch on there with Anthony Valorio as trouble strikes the number 41. Down through the Aqua Minerale, it's disaster as he drops now down past 14th. Casey Malz saying they misjudged their fuel. That's been a major consideration in the last couple of seasons for the Chevrolets. That's ultimately what's put Malz out of that chance for 23rd in this race. We're on that final lap, having started it a moment ago. Then LeBay, when he crosses the line, that'll be the end of race 1. So it appears, looks to be another race win on the charts here for LeBay, having been given one by technicality after the results of the post-race investigations out of round 1. A very controversial turn of events, if I do say so myself. But as we see, though, for LeBay, he's about to take one first. I suppose you could say first legitimate win of this series, not this series, of this season, I should say, not this series. He's taken plenty of those of this season, as he will, with no strings attached, cross the checkered flag first among the fray. For De Tosto, it's going to be an exuberant second place. A great hustle here from McLaren. They've held on to position very nicely. We've seen for De Tosto, this has been a real up-and-coming story where he's been reviving a lot of his precision, a lot of his consistency as well. This has been a problem he had throughout that last season. But now we see here, this is a much more confident start to Season 3. For LeBay, though, we're on board with the Chevrolet, making his way out round through Ravazza for the last time here in race 1 of 2 today. Down towards the line then, race 1, as the checkered flag flies here in Imola, goes to Christian LeBay. Another win on the charts then for the 119, and his first legitimate one this season. No strings attached, no post-race investigations necessary for this one. That's another race win for the 119. For Timo De Tosto, a great hustle to second. And it's very much so worth pointing out here, Vinicius Goyce, what a start to the race he had, and he took it all the way to a podium. Kevin Quain, also great start there, held his ground on the second row, finishes 4th. Byron Forrest down to 5th from 3rd today, but bear in mind he gets to start from 3rd in the next race coming. David Tanguay, real great hustle today. We see from behind, it looks to be a razor-thin exit to today's race here between Vecchiere and Winnings. Winning 7th, Vecchiere in 8th. 37 thousandths of a second between the pair. Heading to the line, Adam Jeffrey, on his first ever race here in this series, takes a very confident top 10 finish. 9th place for the number 42. Vincent Simard, we saw him carve his way through the field there, finishes in the top 10. Andrew Veldkamp in 11th. Across the line from behind him, we see at the moment, that's trouble for Cal Ford. The Jackal's in 12th, but Ford is out of fuel. So across the line, Anthony Valorio for 13th. We see Didier Potvin 14th. Chili Peppers and George Todd to the line. 15th and 16th, but Cal Ford is out of fuel. The 91 is rolling up to the line. Will Cal Ford find his way to the top 20? The chances look remarkably thin. The 484 has become a soapbox rolling to the line. This has got to be among the worst feelings here for Ford. We already saw that Chevrolet, on some cases, we saw earlier as well for one driver, for Casey Malz, had miscalculated their fuel. We see that this has come way too close to the end here for Cal Ford as he limps to the line. And he has dropped to almost an effective last in this race. That's if he can finish this race. You can see it's lost all of its steam there. It stopped just before the checkered flag. Cal Ford out of fuel in the end of race 1. He'll not be looking to make that mistake a second time, but this has been far too costly for the 484. Was looking onto his chances to win in the AM category here in race 1. That ultimately goes to Andrew Veldkamp in the 616 Chevrolet. So at the end of race 1, your division winners in the Pro category, Christian LeBay. In the AM category, Andrew Veldkamp. We'll get a full look at those results in just a moment's time, but that is absolute heartbreak there for Cal Ford. Stunted at the last hurdle there. So looking at those results at the end of race 1 of 2 today, Christian Lebay wins in the pro category with Timo de Tosto second and Vinicius Goyce on the podium after a brilliant start with Mercedes in the 444. Kevin Crane in 4th with Byron Forrest in 5th, David Sangway in 6th, wish for winning 7th, Dylan Vecchiere in 8th, very close behind for 37 thousandths of a second, mind you. And then we see Adam Jeffrey on his first race here in 9th. Vincent Simard rounds out the top 10. Winning in the AM category for race 1 of 2, Andrew Veldkamp up and ahead of the Jackal. Those two separate by less than a second to the checkered flag. Anthony Valorio finishes 13th after troubles in the last couple of laps for Alpine. Didier Potvin 14th with George Todd 15th. We see Chili Peppers 16th with Van Sanchez 17th. Eric Granados in 18th with Adriana Malherbe in 19th. Brandon Carr rounds out the top 20, rolling just before the checkered flag with no fuel in the 888. Oh, not Brandon Carr, sorry. Cal Ford. Brandon Carr, my mistake. Sincerest apologies there. 20th. It's a different Australian. And Stephen Black in 21st. Sorry, Cal Ford, not Brandon Carr. My mistake. You can see those two actually just right next to one another in the paddock. Cal Ford, technically a DNF, but 22nd. Ahead of Casey Malice, 23rd. Richard Cecil, 24th. Ruben Pereira, 25th. And Clinton Bourne in 26th. So yeah, sorry about the mix-up there. That was... got my Australians mixed up. Taking a look then in towards that second grid. We'll be seeing it line up in just a moment's time. But before we get to that, of course, I did mention we had 2 articles of news today. And our second article of news comes from the world of the American Rally Association. Of course, ahead of the rally in the 100-acre wood coming up on March 13th, we see the arrival of Toyota into competitive stead, and it's Seth Quintero set to drive in the new Corolla RC2. Now, Quintero had previously driven for Toyota in their efforts in the World Rally Raid Championship in the Hilux DKR Evo. And now we're set to see the arrival of Toyota onto the American Rally Association Championships, and they're set to compete in the same category as their rivals in the Japanese auto industry and on the rallying market, that being Subaru. Travis Pastrana in the 199 Impreza will go toe-to-toe with Quintero in the number 103 Corolla. This is going to be an exciting time to be an American Rally fan, because we are starting to see the build-up of a new proper premier category in the American Rally Association with committed drives here and builds from both Subaru Motorsports America and Toyota Gazoo Racing. We'll be watching this season of the American Rally Association picking up onto its second round, where we see Toyota make its debut with great interest here on TRTN. Well, rounding out our last article of news then, onto the grid for the second time. Of course, just a preliminary rundown of what we saw is the same grid that we saw onto race 1 today. Of course, both of the grids having been decided from the qualifying we saw far earlier in today's broadcast. It's Lebay from De Tosto, Forrest, Quain, Winnings, Goyce, Tanguay, Simard, Vecchiere and Valorio to make that top 10. Then from 11th to 20th, Bourne, Todd, Jeffrey, Potvin, Sanchez, Ford, Peppers, Veldkamp, Carr and Pereira. And then from 21st down to 24th, Black, Jackal, Granados and Cecil. Changes up in the paddock there, as it appears Cecil didn't originally have, now jog my memory here, but I'm pretty sure he didn't start from last on this grid. That's going to be a bit of a switch up for him there. We do actually see what looks to be a bit of a gap in the grid. Yes, it's between the number 35, Didier Potvin, and the number 6 in front of him, that being Clinton Bourne. So that clearly would have been where Cecil was. So then, of course, we saw a very lively start from the Mercedes of Vinicius Goyce. Was up 3 positions in the first lap, held on to that podium position throughout the race in race 1 of 2 today. Picking up on where we left off in a race 2, we could definitely come to expect to see history repeating itself, but with a lot more fight back from the rest of that grid. So it might not find itself to be as easy a story here for Vinicius Gois. We see with Mercedes AMG. Of course, leading that charge out, we'll see just taking away onto the formation lap in a moment's time, the 119 of Christian Lebay, following alongside him, the 58 McLaren of Timo de Tosto. Again, our leading pair. These two had possibly the most consistent races of any driver on this grid. Started first and second, finished first and second. Very little troubles found on either of their doorsteps. For the 58, there was a little bit of that upset down through Tamburello and Villeneuve for that opening lap, but quickly sorted itself out for a much more comfortable drive from second for the rest of race one. Now, to give you a reminder here as we take away into that formation lap, we're on to race two. So coming out of race one, we saw already another victory for Lebay and also an AM category win for Andrew Veldkamp in the 616. But heading into race two, we've still got one more race today then. Another 30 minutes set to come up here in Imola before the end of round two. We see, unlike the last formation lap, things getting a little bit livelier then for the Mercedes cars. One to watch then, based off of last round's race results. Up 3 positions at the end of that last race. Had a very lively start, and it was Vinicius Gois on your screens at the moment in that bright canary yellow 444. Sporting the colours then, I believe, of the Brazilian flag with the green and yellow affectations. Of course, having raced for VB Racing, a team that we've seen in very loose appearances in the last round just gone of the Console Endurance Series over on NLRL. That was in the 4 hours of Suzuka. Later became the, I believe, what was it there, about 2 hours and 30 minutes roughly of Suzuka. Thereabouts in that ballpark. Sadly, again, G Portal servers not having done them many favours. Now that's somewhat of a historical battle they've had over at NLRL. Evidently, I thought maybe that had caught up to us today with that disconnect earlier on. We're still not entirely clued in as to why that happened, as it seemed to be an entirely localized issue. Well, that'll be something we investigate further down the line, but taking a look here, we're on board with the Mercedes cars inside of that top 10. We see up in front there, Wish for Winning's a driver who definitely had their fair share of great fights throughout race one, looking to keep that ball rolling then into race two. You see here for Kevin Quain, a driver who was caught out by the enthusiastic start from Gois. Wasn't expecting to be taken so quickly for position by the 444. Definitely looked to play things a little bit more elbows out in that opening lap, wanting to hold on to 4th position, but not wanting to allow anyone up in front of him on that charge up towards 3rd. As you see here for Timo de Tosto, this is the driver we'll be watching on board with then for that second race, watching a little further down the front row, but we get a better look of things from the point of view of the 58. With the 119 getting such great starts here, it'll be interesting to see how the 58 stacks up and against. Watching here then with Timo de Tosto, this is a very unique angle, not one often explored from our point of view. Looking on with a driver for the race start, so starting up alongside his left-hand side there. Last race's race winner in race one, that being Christian Lebay, also by technicality last round's race winner at Brands Hatch after the post-race investigation. So Lebay currently, as of yet, on the standings at least, undefeated. So could today be the day that changes in Season 3? Of course, we've seen drivers to give him good challenge from before. Giovanni Battiali, one driver to consider from back in Season 2. We'll see, could it be De Tosto's time to shine here? He's learnt the lessons out of that first race start. What can he do upon its second? Rolling down towards the line, then you can hear him build heat in those tyres by holding the brakes down. Let's see what he can do. We're green and racing here in Imola. A very unique perspective to follow on with here with De Tosto taking us away from the front row. You can just see the depth of that drive for the 119, just how quick he was able to build steam up there in towards Tamburello. Running out wide goes the 58, forced to cut the Variante Tamburello. Timo de Tosto drops in behind Byron Forrest. And it looks like his issues are far from over as he takes a dive onto the grass, still struggling to find footing on the grid as he rejoins out past Didier Potvin. A very bizarre start then from Timo de Tosto. We see up the order, Vinicius Goyce already fighting, this time with David Tanguay. Watch from Dylan Veckere's point of view, just at the back of that top 5. It's LeBay from Forest, from Winnings, from Tanguay, from Veckere in our top 5 at the moment. Right behind them is Simard v Goyce. Do you see that? Goyce leaps up the inside on Simard. So much so that it invites in, by the looks of it there from behind, Clinton Bourne in the number 6 to come and have a go as well. Let's go and catch on board here with the number 6. You see here with Bourne. Right behind him we see Anthony Valorio sneaking in up and ahead of Simard. A little Alpine that could then sneaking its way through the top 10, and as it stands there up to 8th goes that of the Alpine of Anthony Valorio. We see for Vincent Simard, he was trying to get his elbows out in a potential pursuit there over George Todd, who also revels in a great race start. We see, though, yellow flags out. It's for Cal Ford. Further troubles confound the MCR number 484. On the exit of the Variante Alta, looks like trouble there for both Ford and Brandon Carr. Back in the green flag conditions for them. You see here Vinicius Goyce eyeing up a chance at the top 5. Currently, Dylan Veckere, that sentinel of the back of the top 5 positions. We do see very close fighting at hand here between 3 parties, Tanguay, Winnings and Forest. Down towards Tambirello then on what is officially lap 1. Technically lap 2. So you see things get a little bit wide between the 233 and the number 30. Now this is great news for Veckere, because he will be finding much easier ground gained between himself and what is by proxy 3rd place at this time in terms of that grander fight. Looking in behind though, it's worth getting a look on board here with the little Alpine of Anthony Valorio, really punching above its weight in spite of that 25 kilo increase under balance of performance, going toe-to-toe with both Chevrolet and Mercedes inside of that top 10. Super close stuff here, but it's the maneuverability Alpine brings to the table is what keeps them in that competitive position all throughout Sector 2 and parts of Sector 3. But at Tosto, it has been a questionable race start indeed for the number 58. Ran out wide through Tambirello, and it was somewhat of a cascade for him through Sector 1 as he couldn't find his way back onto the track without endangering himself and others. So surprisingly thoughtful in GT4 racing. Often we have seen drivers just kamikaze it back onto the track, but that's great professionalism from De Tosto, but sadly it has cost him being so nice, as he is now currently 11th place, looking to make his way back into the top 10. Up in front, we see Todd v Valorio. George Todd looking his way up the inside with the Mercedes. We could see just down on the anchors, the 41, outbraking him in towards that of Ravazza. We see for Veckere had a big spot of bother in through Ravazza. The Aston Martin now drops in behind Clinton Bourne, who moves up to 6th. Vinicius Goyce up to the top 5. Staying on board then with the Alpine. Not with Ruben Gomez. No, that was a bit of a sleight of hand. No, because we have Valorio actually categorized in the Porsches still on our heads-up display. So not with Ruben Gomez. I'd say a bit of an odd appearance for Gomez. Not a long time ago since we saw him, if I'm not mistaken. See here for Valorio. Yeah, we still need to update a lot of the placards we have over on the stream deck. So you see though, there was yellow flags in the back, and it did collect quite a few cars. Among them was Ruben Pereira, if I'm not mistaken. Quickly getting a look down the order to see the scope of damage here. Rejoining the track is Pereira. Back in the green flag conditions just up in front of him. We see Peppers and Carr as it stands. Pereira off into the gravel again. Now we're going to get a look back up on board with these 3 here. Goyce v Winnings v Tanguay. This is for the podium right now as it stands. We see Wish for Winnings up onto the podium. Up in the foreground there, we saw Byron Forrest, 2.6 seconds off the race lead, currently reinforced after the first 5 minutes, once again by Christian LeBay, but it's all-out warfare between Chevrolet, Mercedes, and even by further technicality, Aston Martin and Alpine for that podium. We see here side-by-side action as the number 30 looks to challenge once again back onto the podium. Could we be seeing the first of the Chevy 123s this season? Not if the 233 has anything to say about it. Trying his luck down through Ravazza, left himself open for the 444. All 3 now make 4 of them with the introduction there of Clinton Bourne's Chevrolet. Will be tucked into each other's slipstream. A bit of a train here running down that opening straight. Vinicius Goyce has the look of a run of things up over Wishful Winnings, but has to try and find the space for it. Meanwhile, behind them, we see Vekere and Valorio being intercepted by Todd and Simard, getting a look up through the order at the scope of things for the Mercedes cars. We saw that things got awfully pear-shaped there for Winnings and Goyce, as now getting up and ahead of them was Vekere and Valorio. You see they're born right in front. So Tanguay currently third. We see tucked in behind him is Vinicius Goyce in that bright yellow Mercedes. Then the bright green Chevrolet in front of us there. That's Clinton Bourne. So we're on with Dylan Vekere right now with Aston Martin. Fighting by proxy for third. Locally, though, fighting for fifth. Look at a look of things in the next 3.5 minutes of the current standings, as things have shaken up quite a dramatic amount since the race start. Really no telling where it could go next, as we see Wishful Winnings having now actually dropped in behind that of George Todd's Mercedes, the number 12, now up and ahead of the 233 after its upset down through Tamburello on this lap just gone. This is the real struggle that Aston Martin find themselves presented with. This is something that's lingered with them for the last couple of seasons as one of the main three manufacturers of this series, is keeping wind with Chevrolet under straight line speed. It's often moments like this where he needs more momentum carried out of the corner to where he can hold it up and alongside here. So for Vekere, he's got himself in a really good spot. He knows that the Chevy's going to start pulling back any moment now, and I think he's just got this one nipped in before the run of Tamburello. As you can see, already pumping the brakes earlier is Clinton Bourne, not looking to risk anything on the run down through turns 2, 3 and 4, knowing if he tucks back onto the racing line, as you can see right now, he can build that gap up almost instantly. Behind them, we see Todd v Valorio nearly kick off in a side-by-side action down through the Variante Villeneuve. We see, though, for the number 161 and number 6, bumping up over the curbs, knocks into Vekere, pushing him into the gravel. We see a whole swarm of cars surround Dylan Vekere on the live footage here. You can see in behind is Timo de Tosto and Vincent Simard, if I'm not mistaken, there on the 120 up in front. Still currently ongoing then. The fighting for, by proxy, 6th place. Oh, that's Valorio turned around down at Piratella, and it collects Todd as well as Winnings. Also bumps into the 120 and the 58 just as we catch on with them. Huge incident on the exit of Piratella. Watch this here. So I believe, yes, so it was Todd collided with the 41. Then the number 12 takes a bit of a quarter spin as it then gets knocked into by the 233. Off in the background, you could see the remnant there of the 41. The incident clearly just showed no end in sight here. But for Vekere, you know, silver lining here. He is back up into that top 6 and only 0.9 of a second away from 5th. So you've got to kind of take the bad with the good in this situation. And in the case of Clinton Bourne, he'll be more than happy to know that the majority of his competition has now been knocked down by the wayside. Means that he's got a better chance of things in this race than he did in the last one. Right now, 5th place. He's got clear line of sight on 4th, but is just a little too far away at this time to act upon it. He'll set his sights on the 444 and see what he can do in the next 20 minutes. Behind him, the flailing back end of the 161 continues to catch Dylan Vekere off guard. That could lead to further troubles for Aston Martin later on in today's race. After 10 minutes of racing so far in race 2, things you would have expected to be a little bit safer, a little bit tamer. Anything but, as everyone is now super confident here in Imola with the machines they have chosen. And Labay continues to lead that charge, 4.2 seconds up from Byron Forrest, who looks to, as it stands right now, be gunning for his best result this season with Chevrolet. So this is almost immediate signs of progress. Taking a look in the pro standings, it's worth pointing out there that in terms of division rankings, it was 6th place in that last round for Byron Forrest. I believe that was still 6th place in the overall ranking, so this is quite the leap towards the trailing end of round 2. Forrest looking to gear himself up as the possible championship rival here to Lebay. We see off in the background goes Vinicius Goyce. Takes a bit of a dive there at the wall. That's going to open the gaps up between himself and Clinton Bourne. Now starting to tow some present company with him. Dylan Vekere having made up some ground here on the number 6. Number 120 of Simard behind, then De Tosto, then Winnings, then Jeffrey. So Adam Jeffrey looking at possible consecutive top 10s in his first appearance to the series. This could be quite the lively start for the 42. I mean, he's been able to keep his head low here, survey the environment, figure out where he stands in all of it, and he's kept himself for the most part out of trouble. So you can't really ask for more than that in an opening performance. We see in the background here a real mixture of cars. Mercedes, Chevrolet, Porsche and Alpine currently fighting for 13th place. Leading that charge then, Richard Cecil. Andrew Veldkamp tucked in behind there. From the point of view of the 607 of Kevin Quain, we see Valorio going side by side with Veldkamp. This is for 14th. The Alpine later onto the brakes there. Really hard down on the anchors. Going wide though through Tamburello, the number 5. Richard Cecil rejoins the track right up over the nose of the 607 of Kevin Quain. Anthony Valorio moves up to 14th ahead of Andrew Veldkamp. Meanwhile, we see here continued pressure applied by the 607 on the number 5. More catch on board with these two. Actually, oh, as you just see bumped through there. That's a bit assertive from the 607. Now, it's not uncommon to see here in GT4. I think you'd be quite surprised to know the amount of times drivers have been bumped. But often on this game, it ends in disaster. So I'm quite pleasantly surprised to see the fact that, yes, there is bump drafting. And we've seen bump drafting on a few occasions in this race. But it has not, in most typical fashions as it's had here on ACC, resulted in such a catastrophic incident. Down through the Aqua Minerale, the number 5 runs things deep, but it invites the number 41 to come on through and challenge the 607 for position. A little bit of a door ding there between the Mercedes and the Alpine. What's going on here? I did say we were possibly liable to see some wheel rubbing, but God, if it doesn't feel like a little bit of bullying there on the poor little Alpine. I mean, look at the size of it. It's like kicking a puppy. Who would do such a thing? Evidently the 607 with an Alpine. I'm not suggesting you would kick a puppy. God, no. In towards Ravazza. The 41 really been bullies here out of position. It's quite surprising. I don't think Valorio was expecting that. Of course, a driver already having seen his fair share of action over on HCCL across both GT4 and GT3. This is definitely a bit of a shock to the system. That's a proper shoulder check, some rugby style stuff there from the 607. I'm quite surprised. So, going to catch on board with some more fights here. We can see it is claustrophobically tight in this 4-way split. Currently for 5th place, Bourne against Vekere, against Simard, against De Tosto, in towards turn 7. Up towards Piratella. Same side to the same incident that caught out the 41 earlier. To no control of his own. Claims no further victims on this run here between this charismatic 4. Chevrolet against Aston against McLaren. Running out wide though goes De Tosto. This could be trouble if he catches the gravel. He's fortunate to kept himself away from that, but he does drop distance off from Simard. So coming up on the halfway mark of this race, we are far from the end of action here in Imola. On the second of 2 races here today. You see the gap start to draw ever near between the 161 and the number 120. Simard looking to possibly go up and around the outside, allows the 161 to get much later under the brakes. Was hoping Vekere would have ran himself out of road, but didn't find his luck on his side on that go around. Now taking a look further down the line, we see here Valorio v Cecil, battle of the former featherweight cars. Of course, both Porsche and Alpine struggling under BOP today. We see, though, great side-by-side action amongst the much smaller cars of the grid. Very, very close stuff here. 2 drivers who know their stuff. We had the pleasure, of course, of speaking with Richard Cecil last season, where in which we learned of this move over to Porsche. A brand he has got quite a few decades worth of experience with, a veteran racing driver. Now makes the move over to the world of sim racing. Of course, we've followed on with Cecil all the way from season 1, where he actually started out with Alpine in this series. Now we see Anthony Valorio having since shifted away from Porsche. So real clash of the worlds here. A mixture of the two cars that started and now preside over these two drivers' tenure in this series. Of course, we saw for Valorio there was a bit of a mixture between going to Porsche and also going with McLaren, brands that we've seen him with plenty of times before. In fact, took his first wins in this series in Watkins Glen with McLaren. And as mentioned earlier on in the stream, this approach heading in towards Alpine, you can see why he's done it, because, well, yes, the Alpine may not be the most competitive of cars. He is having a whale of a time fighting with every driver on the grid here. It's smiles per gallon for the number 41. I really do quite like that term, so nice to be able to say it twice. Meanwhile, the 161 has a drive-through penalty incurred out through the run between Acqua Minerale and the Variante Alta. Dylan Vecchiere subsequently now possibly going to be dropping out of that top 10. Bear in mind, of all tracks to end up with a drive-through penalty, Imola is not among the greatest to see here. It is quite a long pit lane, of course, owing to its use as not only a Grand Prix circuit, or I suppose in this case former Grand Prix circuit, but also owing to its current itinerary of events hosted. It is also a thoroughbred endurance racing circuit, hosting rounds for the European Le Mans Series and the FIA World Endurance Championship. So that does leave the battle a little bit sparse here, with Winnings and Di Tosto now taking up the helm of the absence of Vecchiere. This also promotes, and it's worth pointing out here, Adam Jeffrey another position now as he's pressured by George Todd down through Tamburello, the number 12, putting the pressure onto the 42 on the exit of turn 4. Up and around the outside goes Todd. That still leaves Jeffrey in the top 10. It's worth pointing that out. He's got 12.5 minutes to the line here, and there is still absolutely the chances of consecutive top 10 appearances for this one. He's going to have to fight hard for this one, though, because you can see in the background approaching is the 607, a driver we know can make up positions very, very quickly. As for the fight of the AM division lead here... Oh, we just accidentally cut away there. Accidentally pressed, I think it was one of the triggers we pressed there. But we're on board with Andrew Veldkamp. Didier Potvin chasing from behind. So Aston Martin against Chevrolet for control of the AMs in this second race of two. Meanwhile, we see Winnings v Di Tosto. This is 7th up for grabs down through the Variante Alta. Very spry exit amongst both cars there. You can see that they've got them set up quite tightly. Very responsive to input on the exit there. Much like we've seen in the fights between several other manufacturers and Chevrolet, we do find it to be again the case here with McLaren, of drivers having to be a lot more complacent on that opening straight, knowing that in greater parts, unless they can leverage a really, really good send on the exit of Ravazza, they're not likely to be keeping up side by side with the McLaren. It's one of that sort of big two when it comes to the discussion of straight line speed down in GT4. Looking in some nearby fights here, we see Chili Peppers versus Ivan Sanchez. Cal Ford behind them in the number, not number 19, sorry, number 484. They're 19th in this grid. Number 91 leading this fight for 17th. It's worth pointing out he is catching up rather quickly here to Brandon Carr, 16th in the Triple Eight. Aston Martin now forced into this fight here with Sanchez, Peppers and Ford approaching from behind. Valorio, you can see there in the Alpine. Having dropped back considerable lengths in the last time we saw him, so it does beg the question what happened here for the little Alpine. We see a bit of contact there, the Triple Eight and the 91 collide, but it does not erupt into anywhere near the degree of calamity we saw in the last incident to pertain over this area of the track. As we see Cal Ford tries to serve things through, collides with the Triple Eight of Brandon Carr. Valorio soars on through then in the Alpine, up an easy scope of 4 positions, my word. Threaded the eye of a needle there for that move. Very, very well done. Hats off to him there, because that's, I believe, put him one step closer to returning to that top 15. Nearest car in sight is going to be the Jackal on your screens here in that gold-plated 999. Now, looking at some of the other fights on track, looking back up to the top 10, as we see here, Wishful Winnings versus Timo de Tosto continues to rage on in that control of 7th place. In the time since as well, we are seeing another part of this fight develop as De Tosto draws distance in on the car up in front, the 120 of Vincent Simard with Chevrolet. Are we perhaps seeing here with Simard the early warning signs of perhaps a bit of lift and coast on the 120? Of course, we know the Chevrolets have been rather inconsistent for fuel consumption. Of course, with every expectation that it would have been the largest engine on this grid, 6.2 litre naturally aspirated V8 engine. I wouldn't call it fuel economic in the slightest. But as we saw for Cal Ford in race 1, it was right down to the ragged edge. It also took Casey Miles out of that first race of 2 when he miscalculated fuel. Are we perhaps seeing a bit of preventative action from Simard, and that's what's dropped this gap away? Or has it been conversely the case that in the trailing end of race 2, Timo de Tosto has found a real spur of confidence to push himself back up towards that 3rd row? Because right now, save for the one part here of Vinicius Goyce, we are dangerously close to something we hoped we'd not see for at least a lot further into this season, that being a Chevrolet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Currently then, the one possible chance we have away from it is this Mercedes. We are seeing the possible build-up here in the last 7 minutes to a fight for second. David Tanguay reeling in ground over Byron Forrest. So looking back down the line just quickly here, we see with Dylan Vecchio now having gone up and ahead of Chili Peppers and Cal Ford, he now sets his sights on Ivan Sanchez. Also see in the meantime as well that Adam Jeffrey has now lost position out over Kevin Quinn, but is not all yet lost in that pursuit of a consecutive top 10. He has tucked in rather nicely here behind the 607, attempting to mimic his line. This could represent a pretty unique part here for Adam Jeffrey, of course, to learn off of some of the more experienced drivers of this series. Now, that's not to say that Jeffrey himself is not experienced. Of course, we don't have much on the radar here about some of these new drivers into the series, so as much as it is as much our first time experiencing them on the grid as much as it is for them experiencing the grid themselves. It's always rather interesting with these new drivers to see how they interact with the grid. We see some drivers, such as the case here with Jeffrey, opting to learn much more intuitively off of the others around him to help improve his own ability. And this is one of those core facets we see in drivers during their development, where they get to learn and grow vicariously through others. We also see for other drivers as well that already have some of that underlying experience and expertise, such as the case for Vinicius Goyce, so they've been able to drop into this field and wreak havoc with it. These are drivers already quite well equipped with the knowledge and know-how of how to wage war in GT4, and are not afraid of the competition of an experienced grid of drivers who know each other's game, because that comes to be their advantage. The unknown is what their real fuel is in the early parts of this championship, and for Vinicius Goyce, he's been able to exploit that perfectly. No one knows how he's going to play this out, and that has been to his benefit. We saw it in race 1 as well, on that leap up from 6th to 3rd. he's been able to basically break a line in the information stream between these drivers, because of course we've seen in greater parts the same names returning season in, season out. And when it's not them, it's drivers we've seen already interact with at least a handful of the drivers that are routine regulars to this series. Away from that conversation, then looking back in with some of the other fights, Winnings v DeTosto still rages on as we head into the last 4 minutes of today's session. Tanguay now within a second of Forrest for second place. It's worth pointing that out again for Byron Forrest. This has been quite the ambitious change in direction for him. Of course, I wouldn't say it was as dramatic a difference between the move from Porsche to Aston Martin. That constituted a sort of full refurb of how he chose to tackle driving the car. They are alien experiences to one another, but this seems a little bit, by comparison, more streamlined. This is going from one front engine car to another. But that's not to say that the challenge isn't equal, as he's having to sort of relearn the car on a familiar platform. So this has been a much quicker head start for him compared to that leap from Porsche to Aston, where it took a bit of a slow burn to give him the results he needed. This has been a much more immediate charge from him. He was 6th in round 1. Right now looks to be 2nd, equalizing on his best result in GT4 that he got back in his time with Aston Martin. And of course, we've seen in other series here on the Competizione Performance League banner that Byron Forrest is race-winning material, as he proved in Jaguar, picking up his race win in Brands Hatch. So we know that he's got the recipe there to be a race winner in this series. And could this move to Chevrolet spark the early signs here? Perhaps even as early as this season, maybe not, maybe if not next, in Season 4, of a potential race win on the horizon. We've seen Forrest to challenge for championships. Race wins for him have been hard to come by in GT4 amidst a wave of LeBay-led dominance, but perhaps tapping into the same manufacturer that has given such great credence to LeBay's 2 championships, could that be the secret behind it all? And I imagine that's only scratching the surface. But for the 824, we are seeing much more confident run of things here. David Tanguay, his time is running short to try and take initiative here on 2nd place. Forrest definitely looking to aim more defensively coming into this last lap now. About 10 seconds up the road from these two is the leading Chevy of Christian LeBay, who's not long from starting that last lap. He's down through Acqua Minerale as these two make their way up through Piratella. So there is definitely the expectations of a last lap dash coming up around the corner. We see here, this could be the same story for 6th place. Simard v DeTosto v Winnings. Chevrolet versus McLaren versus Mercedes. And even farther down the line, we also see here in the case of 2 Aston Martins, Vecchiere and Carr. So we see Vecchiere get up and ahead of Brandon Carr on the run down through Tamburello. We also see Potvin v Cecil, as Cecil goes up to 13th. Watching here with Wishful Winnings, leaping up the inside on the run through to the Acqua Minerale. Goes up and ahead of Timo de Tosto. McLaren down a peg for the run down towards the Variante Alta, trying to fake a move up the inside there, trying to get inside the 233's head. Couldn't find any dice of it. The exit of the Alta in towards Ravazza. And on the run down the opening straight, this will be his one last opportunity to usurp command away from the Mercedes of Wishful Winnings. These two have clashed heads throughout this fantastic spirit of fighting in race 2 of round 2 today. The last lap of round 2 coming up just around the corner, kicking off that last lap. We see here very defensive action from the 824. Holds on to that left-hand side of the track, hogging the inside line away from Tanguay. Tucks onto that racing line, has got a good run of things out through turn 4, is going to really need to find the gap and squeeze his way in down through either Villeneuve or Tosa. Backs out through Villeneuve. Byron Forrest was almost immediately aware of this. I think it was a case where he was playing for a bit of a catch-22 here. It's either, you know, you back out and I stay on the line, or you commit and I'm going straight into you. Dare I say a bit Alonso-esque from Forrest, but it's that kind of aggressive defense that he needs here, with the 30 advancing very quickly onto him. Up through turn 8, into turn 9 we go. Bear in mind, Tanguay to the outside, but if he can hold on to it, he'll be to the inside down at the Aqua Minerale. So Byron Forrest may need to go very late onto the brakes to hold on to it here. Actually goes earlier in the attempts to run for a switchback. And can he land it? Oh my word, yes he can. What a move by Byron Forrest. That was absolutely epic stuff. Watch this back. This is textbook. Watch him cook. This is insane stuff. Out through the Aqua Minerale. Oh my word. Chef's kiss there. Hats off to Byron Forrest. But does he hold the ground? Yes, he does on the run in towards Ravazza. We see down towards the line then Christian Lebay, as the checkered flag flies, wins for the second of 2 races here in Imola. But let's quickly go to catch on board with the remainder of this fight here. Tanguay up and alongside. It's going to be a drag race in the side draft over Byron Forrest to the line. David Tanguay tucks in by 96 thousandths away from Byron Forrest. My word, what a race finish there from the 2 Chevys. Vinicius Goyce 4th with Mercedes. Clinton Bourne redemption in Imola. A DNF in that last race, but in race 2 in the top 5. Simard in 6th. De Tosto 7th. Winnings 8th. Todd 9th. Kevin Quain in the top 10. Unfortunately then for Adam Jeffrey, 11th place, but still coming away from his first 2 races in this series in the top 10, and then also by that metric in the top 15 in the second race. Not too shabby at all. Back-to-back wins here for Andrew Veldkamp in Imola. Richard Cecil in 12th, Didier Potvin in 13th, the Jackal 14th, Valorio in 15th, Vekere in 16th after that drive-through penalty, Carr in 17th. Sanchez and Peppers looking to roll things down to the line here. Let's see. Can he do it? Pepper's very close there by 184 thousandths of a second. Finds himself in 19th. Black in 20th. Pereira in 21st. But what a race end there. That fight between Forrest and Tanguay was absolutely perfect. Lebay then wins back-to-back here in Imola. Not to take away from his victories, though. Somewhat overshadowing his procession to the line was that glorious fight with Forrest and Tanguay. I mean, get a look back on the replays here. This was just absolutely brutal. Watch this. Switchback earlier onto the brakes then in the fight for second. Leaps for it up the inside. It's just perfect. It's just perfect from the 824. Well, if that's not a show of great confidence in his move to Chevrolet, I'm not sure what more evidence you require. Well, that's all from us here on TRTN in terms of today's coverage of Season 3 Round 2. Back-to-back pro wins for Lebay, back-to-back AM wins for Veldkamp. Taking a look then on the calendar to where we'll be next, we're heading into another venue here in Italy, the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza, for the first enduro race of the season. Round 3, 90 minutes of racing to follow on March 17th. That'll be technically on the run into March 18th, as we actually start, because of the daylight savings time between North America and Europe, we actually start at midnight for our broadcast as opposed to 1 in the morning. And until then, we'll be seeing you at Monza, taking away from what has been a brilliant double sprint so far, the first of the season here for Season 3. Great stuff throughout. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Our next broadcast, we'll be heading to the Circuit de la Sarthe with the folks over at MSC in the second round of their Le Mans series. Do look forward to that one. Not Le Mans series, the LMU series, Le Mans Ultimate series, I should say. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care and good night.